Friends, we are back for another DPZ collector series. He's got the card father, Marco, is on. We've got a part 1 coming on today, and then we've got part 2 coming on tomorrow. So we got a full weekend of DPZ's collector series. Going to be good stuff. Don't forget, we've got our affiliate links down below. Thank you to those that have been using the eBay affiliate link to make eBay purchases, as well as the SlabMags affiliate code. It's the only place you can get 10% off these suckers on the internet. And man, we've been actually making a lot of sales on these, and it just makes sense. Your best cards are sitting in a slab. What happens if they fall off the shelf? What happens if they get damaged? You got to send it, back to PSA or SGC or wherever? Who wants to bother with that, especially your high-end stuff? Make sure it's in a SlabMag, UV protection, scratch resistant. And now we start the show. Frank.
And we are live. Welcome, friends, to another episode of the Collectors Series. I'm your host, DPZ. And with me, I have Marco Bisio Jr., and this is part 3 of our conversation with Marco about all things hobby. Marco is, now if you've watched part 1 and part 2, and you will at this point have watched part 1 and part 2, these videos are evergreen, so we record them ahead of time and then we release them later. Depending on when you're watching this, maybe this news has become old news, but I always think it's fresh news. If you're in the hobby and you care about cards and you collect, I think this topic of conversation, it never goes out of style. It's always in the forefront of every collector's mind. So with that said, Marco, thanks for joining us again.
My absolute pleasure, Dennis. DPZ, it's good to be here.
Good. So talk to me about, recently it is, there was I don't know if it was a YouTube clip or a TikTok, I don't know what it was, but Evan Mathis, a former Pro Bowl guard for the Philadelphia Eagles, he's a longtime collector, and he showcased how you can cut and trim a card. He used some 1965 Topps cards, some common, and he just demonstrated how easy it is to trim the card. And the people that are really good at it, you never know. And here's the ways you can detect it, being small in the PSA case. And then, it caused an uproar. And then Sports Card Nonsense, Mike and Jesse had him on, and they interviewed him. And in that interview, he disclosed his thoughts on how he feels. This has been going on since day one, since the very first PSA slab. The Honus Wagner was trimmed with that one guy, the Maestro guy. I think that was part of his plea, is to come out with more information of things, or just basically disclose other things that he had done. So that card was obviously altered, and he thinks that most cards are altered. PSA 10s don't come along very often, especially older cards. It's really hard to tell when they're doing it right. And you should just, there are a handful of big players in the hobby, sellers, dealers, that know how to do this, or know people that know how to do this. And they basically alter their cards, get the grades they want, sell them. And he thinks this just is what it is. We should all accept it. It doesn't really matter. Obviously, there's a counter argument on, someone's holding a card they believe is an authentic card and an authentic grade, but now all of a sudden it's not. And of course, grading is subjective. We know that. But now all of a sudden these cards are not what we think they are. It opens up a whole can of worms. I know this has been a topic of discussion in the hobby for years and years and years. But, now it's all of a sudden coming to the forefront again. Marco, as a longtime collector, can you speak to what Evan's talking about? And what are your thoughts on altering a card for a grade? Where's the line?
So, Dennis, this is a near and dear topic to my heart. From watching the first 2 episodes and speaking with you over the course of this past month, it's been an absolute pleasure. And a lot of the things that we've talked about are grading, my story, why my collection is raw, why I refuse to send anything into grading. And the answer is that right there, Dennis. I know it's it might be an unpopular opinion. It might ruffle some feathers in the hobby, and especially for those that that I run in the circles with. Obviously I'm a Griffey collector. You all know that from watching the previous episodes, and I don't have many other cards besides Griffey in my collection. But the circle that I run with, 90s Griffey, super collectors, and we all talk about the same thing. And there's a lot of people that will reply to my posts on Instagram and say, dude, it's so great to see some of these cards raw, right? As opposed to everything in slabs. And then what I don't get on the flip side of that, what I don't get is, why I don't grade, right? Like why do you have this card ungraded? And that kind of, it makes me happy to hear that, because the people appreciate the raw cards. I mean, the majority of major collectors in the hobby will have everything slabbed. So, Dennis, to get to the answer, the meat and potatoes of the question here, I feel very, very passionate about that. So much so that I know, like this man here and like so many others in the hobby, that these things are happening in the hobby. And this is why I've stood my ground and quite frankly, lost hobby friends along the way because of my viewpoints, because I'm so passionate about that viewpoint, right? Because I'm so passionate about not grading and, the monetary value that comes along with grading, the purpose of grading, the grading companies. I mean, Dennis, I'll tell you right now, I have cards that I've purchased as a PSA 10 because it's the only one that I've seen pop up in 5, 6, 7 years. And I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get it. So I bid and, I have my max bid and I end up winning the PSA 10, but then I get it in hand and there's a noticeable flaw, like a chip on the side of the card or a white corner, and it's still graded a PSA 10. So not only do we discuss and talk about the trimming and the manipulation of cards going on, but again, it's a human process. So there are human flaws. But when you say something's a PSA 10, like gem mint pristine condition, that's exactly what that should mean, Dennis. It should mean exactly that there's not a single flaw in that card. And quite frankly, again, in a very unpopular opinion, that's why I love BGS, is because they have 4 subgrades. They have a center and a corner and an edges and a surface. Those 4 things make up the card, as opposed to a PSA 10. Like what is it grading, right? And that's the hobby standard. PSA 10 is a hobby standard, and a PSA 10 is worth far more than a BGS 9.5, which is a gem mint. It could have a 10, a 10, a 10, and a 9.5, and it's still graded a 9.5. I mean, I think that's actually graded a 10 in BGS standards, not a black label. But I mean, you understand the point, right? Is that PSA has become the standard, and not only is it the standard, it's a human process, so we're prone to errors. But then again, and this is straight from the babes, the mouths of babes, right? The straight from the horse's mouth, that PSA has a limitation on the amount of trimming that can go on a card, and whether or not that's millimeters or whatever the actual measurement is, as long as it fits within that parameter, those parameters, then a card can still be graded as not altered. And so, you alluded to, you talked about, the football player alluded to it. If you know how to do this, you know the exact specifications that you can get away with in order to trim that card. So if there's a slight white corner, or if there's a slight edge that's flaking, or a slight edge that has a little bit of a crease to it, you can get away with that as long as you know the specifications that PSA will allow in order for them to grade it without being altered. So again, you knew this. I think the hobby at large now knows this and has known this. But in terms of my viewpoint, I don't have any other information, right? Like I don't know, like I don't, again, grade cards. I don't know the process. I don't talk to people that know the process. But again, my viewpoint is that's exactly why I don't grade. I don't grade for that reason. I'm not selling my cards to, have this one card go from a raw to a 9.5 or a 10 to make more money, albeit I'll make a lot more money, right, if I was to sell that. We had a super collector sell off his collection over the last 3 years, continuing trickling to sell that collection, and graded everything. I mean, there were purchases that were made raw, but those cards tended to be cards that would not grade high or that were deemed not worthy of grading. So they were sold as raw cards. And, the conversation at that point, and again, without naming any names here, but I lost hobby friends over this. There were people that I didn't speak to in the hobby for months because I stood my ground on the grading process, on the manipulation of the cards, of what that actually meant to the sales of those cards. And it just happened, right? But again, I'm a man of principle, and I'm going to stand my ground till the end, right? Like I won't grade cards for that reason, is because I know that. So sorry, Chris. I mean, I know I kept reiterating the same thing over and over again, but
no, that's okay. I want to follow up. So
sure.
You don't grade cards because you worry about, you're concerned about the authenticity of, you like the card being in its natural state without any sort of manipulation. Now, let me counter that. We're talking about people that are manipulating cards. So if they're manipulating cards and selling them raw, I mean, it's going to be a lot easier to pass the real one along or pass the fake one off, unless you really know what you're looking for. And if some of these people really know what they're looking for, like this Evan Mathis gentleman, he knows how to locate, or he can spot a fake. He can spot a fake card. He talked about an 86 Michael Jordan that Mike had from Sports Card Nonsense, Mike Gio, and he noticed it was a fake. He called it as a fake, and it ended up being a fake because he was able to see that and recognize that, which I think is a talent. So if these cards are being circulated after being trimmed, because another part of the conversation was, well, I'm just doing this to keep it for my personal collection. Who cares? Well, once that card gets out into the wild, now you have people that are paying money thinking they're getting something when they're not. The authenticity of the item is not truly there. It's not authentic. I think that the great thing about sports card collecting is you're getting something now, however how old it is, whatever you're getting is in its authentic state. You're not getting something that's perfect sometimes because it's not meant to be perfect because of the way it was kept. Or if you're getting something perfect, then you're being rewarded by getting something that somebody really took care of from day one. And not only that, but it came out of the factory. It came into the packs. I mean, all these things had to happen for it to be a perfect card. It's miraculous if you think about it. It really shouldn't happen very often, and especially in the older, vintage, even through the 80s. I mean, you think about all the different quality control issues, off-centering, the dots, the misprints, all these different things.
Error cards.
Print defects, error cards, all that. So I think that to find a perfect card, it's probably a lot more difficult than it probably has seen. Of course, you got a lot of cards that are being, cracked and resubbed, but the PSA 10s are obviously not, for the most part being cracked and resubbed. Those numbers, I wonder if you bring them into question because you go, well, wait, how true are those numbers? How true are those cards? Are they really PSA 10s? So if you're a PSA 10 guy like myself, I'm talking to myself right now. I'm kind of wondering, do I really have perfect cards, or do I have cards that were manipulated somewhere down the line to become perfect cards? And not only are they becoming perfect cards because of manipulation potentially been done to them, you have another human being who just happens that day to think it's a PSA 10. Maybe another person down the line doesn't think it is. So the whole thing is kind of thrown upside down in my opinion. But the raw card, yes, it's really cool. But I feel like you're going to get duped more easily with a raw card unless you really, really know what you're doing and know what you're looking for. Right? How do you respond to someone like me that goes, I don't know exactly what to look for, and if I don't know a Marco or a Joey Peapod or a Nat Turner or somebody who really knows these cards, how in the world am I going to know whether I'm getting duped or not?
So what I don't want to do, right? And I mean, I should have probably prefaced the whole conversation, the previous conversation by this, is that what I don't want to do is scare people away from either a raw card or a grading card, or, I mean, heaven forbid, right? The hobby in general. And I mean, in every business out there, in the hobby, the collecting world that we live in, Dennis, it is a business, right? I mean, people buy, they sell, they trade. It's a business, just like stocks, just like retail. I mean, it is a business, and a business owner has to make money. So if people do this for a living, they have to not find ways to manipulate cards or, to trim cards. That's not what I'm talking about, but they have to find ways in order to maximize their profits. And what grading did for the hobby was that exact thing, right? And we discussed in previous episodes where, 3-4 years ago, you could get, and again, just a very basic example here, you could get a PSA 10 98 EX Future Griffey number to 91, the purple and pink card. In a PSA 10 for $5,000. And we all know that card right now would sell for $30, $35, maybe even $50,000 to the right person, right? Why? Because it's that set. It's one of those sets that crosses over from basketball to hockey to football to baseball. It's in every single sport. And again, Dennis, we talk about the cards like an 86 Michael Jordan or an 89 Upper Deck Griffey or, some of these other, like the PMGs, like the ECs. These are cards that everybody's after. It's not a basic insert that only a Griffey guy would go after, or only a Tom Brady guy would go after, or only a player collector would go after, i.e., an example, a card we've mentioned in every one of our episodes, the Giants of the Game, right? That 99 Pacific Invincible Giants of the Game. That is a Griffey card, right? Yeah, of course it's a Griffey card, but that's a Griffey's collector card. Griffey collector's card, right? Where if you're a Griffey fan, you're going to go after that. If you're if you're trying to put together the set, you might go after that, but it's not a basketball guy coming over to baseball or a football guy coming over to baseball to grab that card, right? The basketball guy is coming over to get the PMG, the ECs, the Star Rubies, some of these other cross-pollinated cards that are out there. So again, we go back to the grading of these cards. I don't want to disparage anyone. Again, there are 5 or 500 people that watch this. Please don't be scared of getting into the hobby or pursuing different avenues in the hobby or grading in the hobby or buying raw cards in the hobby. For you, Dennis, as a PSA 10 collector, just be selective, right? Be selective and hold that card in your hand. Ensure that your investment, that the money that you are spending, and this goes for everybody, is worth that money, the hard-earned money, whatever you do, that you are spending on that card, right? Get a second opinion, get a third opinion. Make sure that card, again, is not altered. And we talk about the cards, right? As an example, we've referenced in other episodes too, your 98 Bowman's Best Atomic Refractor PSA 10, right? That card cross-pollinates across brands. So of course it's going to be one of those that people are after, that people are going to pay special attention to make sure that it's not an altered card, right? It's not it doesn't have flaws. There's no flaking on the edges, and for some reason it made it out of the quality control process at a grading company, PSA, BGS, whoever, and still as a Gem Mint 10 card, right? BGS 9.5, 10, whatever the grade is. If it made it out without a flaw, then you can make a sound judgment that, hey, my investment, the money that I'm pouring into this hobby, the love for this card is absolutely legit. And so, again, it's not to disparage raw grading, or again, heaven forbid, not getting into the hobby because of that. I also feel that it is what it is. Right. And just like anything that you do, any investment that you make, anything that you pour your heart and soul into, you got to take the good, the bad, and the ugly. I love that phrase, right? It's the good and the bad and the ugly. And unfortunately, there's two negative connotated words, bad and ugly, in that. But again, there is the ugly side to this hobby. There is a bad side to the hobby, but there is also a good or great side to this hobby. And that good or great side to the hobby is the love that we have for card collecting and the cards that we hold in our hand. Go ahead, Dennis.
If that's the good, then what's the bad and the ugly?
The bad and the ugly is the trimming. Okay, is the negative attitudes with sellers, right? You buy a card, you go to a show and the person that you're dealing with is just super rude. I mean, that has really nothing to do with grading, but that is the bad side, the ugly side to the hobby, right? Or again, we've alluded to this too, that somebody walks into a hobby shop, has no idea what kind of collection they have. Okay. EX Now 98 Griffey, right? Or, that Michael Jordan card, or that Tom Brady rookie card, or that LeBron James rookie card. And they have no idea that collector that owns that card because they inherited it from their parents. They bought it out of a pack when they were 20 years old, and they've had it in a shoebox, and they did, life happened and they haven't had time to follow the hobby at all. They take it in the shop and say, hey, I have this card. What can you give it to me? What can you get? What can you give me for it? And the owner goes, I can give you this. And then later on, the former owner finds out what happened. That's the ugly side, right? Just dishonest. If I can sum it up in one word, dishonesty in the hobby is the worst part. And that dishonesty goes into trimming of cards, goes into altering cards, manipulating cards to fit that mold of a PSA 10 standard. That is the bad and the ugly side to the hobby. It's not the people buying these cards. That's not the ugly side. Okay. That's the exciting side, that people have the ability to say, you know what, I can buy a card raw for $1,000, or I can buy a PSA 10 because it's supposed to be in perfect, pristine condition because of those aforementioned, ways of storing and taking care of, Dennis, that you talked about earlier. Because of that, you are being rewarded for having that card, right? And the status that card has, right? And it is amazing. It's amazing to say that out of 91 or 100 or 50, that I have one of the two or the only one that has been graded a PSA 10. Now, again, that raises a different question, Dennis, right? And it's all subjective that, let's say a card has 50 copies of it and only eight of them have been graded. And then somebody goes and pays a premium for the one of two that's a PSA 10. What about the other 40? Right? Yeah. What about the other 40 cards that are circulating out there or are in people's collections that are not graded, not graded with BGS, not graded PSA 10? I mean, PSA, any grading company, but there's 40 raw cards out there. So are you really only purchasing and investing in a population 2 card? Again, we ask why I don't grade, why my 99.9 of my collection is raw. That's the reason why. And there are cards that I have in my collection that I know would not grade a PSA 10. I know they would. Yeah,
you know that. I mean, that's a really interesting point when you talk about population reports. Are so hard to trust because people crack and resubmit, and it's impossible for all of these third-party grading companies to keep track of that data unless you send the flip in. Nobody really does that. So now you have, numbers you really can't trust. It's why you want to stick to graded version, serial numbered important cards if you're player collecting.
Yes.
Of if you're going to spend, significant money, and then do the research and talk to a lot of people that know that set, know that insert, know that particular card. What are the odds that particular card's going to grade a 10 anyway? And so if this cards just don't grade well at all. So that number, even if there's another 50 out there, you're probably going to be safe with that pop 4, pop 5, pop 3, pop Absolutely. 2, because you're out of 100 or out of 50 or whatever it may be, because the sensitivity of the card and all that. So there are people like you that have been in the hobby for a very long time, and you're more like a gatekeeper. You don't want, I'll give you a story. I was looking at blowout forums. I did it for a long time, maybe a year. And I just was cruising through and just reading all the comments and learning and educating myself from all the people on that site and all the stuff they were talking about. And then I wanted to actually be able to contribute and say something. So I applied to get on there, and then they banned me for life. That was the responses. You're banned from life. Not only are we not going to let you on, we're going to ban you for life. And I'm like, for what? I'm a brand new person in the hobby. I haven't done anything. What are you banning me for? And it made no sense. And I remember having that taste in my mouth. Why would I want to get involved in this? This is stupid. People, we're collecting cards. And you're banning me for life. So I sent an email from my work email, and I'm in a decent position where I work, and I'm not just some goofball, and I'm not some fraudster either. I'm just been reading. I've done nothing. So I sent an email can you please why? And of course, it went on. No one responded, but I was like, why did you ban me for life? Is there somebody else with my name that's apparently done nefarious things? Like, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one. So let me know what it is. And it just left me feeling like, I don't even know if I want to do it. This is stupid. I'm sitting here learning all this stuff from all these people. It's really cool. I try to join the chat, try to become part of a community, enter the community. And that's what I got. So I remember after that, I stopped looking at Blowout. I was like, this is stupid. I mean, this is whoever's moderating this. That's ridiculous. Like, okay. And then I started listening to some of the podcasts, like Luca Tiger Braun and all these different people. That's kind of how I got my fix when it came to learning stuff. But I really was yearning to learn from someone like you or someone like Joe or someone like Nat. I wanted to learn from these people that have been doing this for a long time that could teach me, and I can learn and understand and grow, and not be a guy on here talking like I know what I'm talking about. I don't. I don't know anything. I still don't know anything. I'm still learning all the time. And so I wanted to continue learning from people like you. And so that was a very frustrating experience for me right from the very beginning. And I can't imagine if someone you talk about people in the ugly side of the hobby. If you experience that, it makes you not want to become, you don't want to get back into the hobby. It's like, what is this? Are these guys thinking they're too cool for school? You don't want to let somebody else in the room. Like, it doesn't, to me, that from like, on a personal level, I can't stand stuff like that because that's not the way I am with how I lead people, how I associate with people in life. Like, that's a terrible way to live your life, is to kind of draw a little circle and go, you stay out. Unless it's like, a toxic individual you don't want. Like, that's a different story, but just, interested party, interested person, like, you don't kick them to the side. Are you one of those? I mean, I would say no. But how do you feel about folks that are like that, these gatekeepers? I mean, they're people that are like you, that have been collecting. You're like the prototypical old school collector. You don't grade your cards. You have all these cards. You don't really sell them either. And you collect them, and you've been doing this forever, and you're passionate about it. You're like the prototypical collector that has been around way before all the social media, the golden, TV show or the Netflix show, the COVID boom. You've been here since day one. So what are your thoughts on that in my experience? And what would you say to that?
Dennis, I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that you had that experience, right? I don't mess with Blowout as much as I used to. I was very I was very active, in Freedom Cardboard, which is FCB. And then I was introduced to Blowout way later. And Blowout's more of a newer forum. Obviously you can buy, sell, trade. A lot of the sports cards companies right now are shops. Major shops sell through Blowout. They sell hobby wax and old wax and things like that. So first of all, I'm sorry you had that experience, and ultimately that's why, Dennis, I've lost friends, along the way. And when I say friends, I would love, Dennis, to sit in a room and a quick tangent here. That's why that's why those shows are so awesome, right? Like, capital AWE some, right? Like, they are awesome because you get to interact with people that you get to physically, yeah, interact with people that you interact with on a monthly, weekly, sometimes daily basis virtually. And in a world that is virtual, right? You and I, Dennis, have never met in person, right? So the relationship that you and I have built over the past 2 months has all been virtual. Granted, I think these interactions that you and I have had, because I get to see you live in person, like on camera, are way more than some people I've known in the hobby for 15 years, Dennis. Yeah. That I've never physically seen on camera before, and also never seen in person before. But when you go to the National and you get to see these people and you get to meet them physically for the first time after having a relationship with them for 9-10 years. Dennis, most of the time, excuse my French, but most of the time, that 10-year relationship that we have with people in the hobby is longer than a marriage, is longer than a friendship that you used to have back in high school, right? That they're longer than relationships that we have with our significant others. And that's incredible to me, and a little bit scary at the same time, that we don't get to meet these people unless it's at events like that. So again, when you talk about being the gatekeeper and experiences like you had, Dennis, where, it's the good old boy network, and it is absolutely. It's like my experience. I'll share a quick story, a very quick story, but as a way to relate to your story. I played professional volleyball, right? I played collegiate volleyball. I played a little bit in high school. My high school didn't have volleyball, so it was only intramurals. And then I went to college. I played collegiate. I played on the beach. I got trained by some of the guys in the AVP. And then afterwards, I played doubles and in indoor sixes. And I coach volleyball with people that I play professionally with, right? For money, right? We played for money. And in that experience, when you stepped on the court and you couldn't play volleyball, you were not welcome. You were not welcome. And, you find yourself in that state if you could play volleyball. Okay. I won't say anything other than, yes, I can play volleyball. But when I stepped out there and you had somebody come out that couldn't play, they were not welcome on the court. They were not welcome. They had to go on the opposite side of the beach. They had to go on a completely different court, and they were not welcome in that space. And that experience that I had being introduced to the beach game of volleyball in San Diego when I went to school down there, that's exactly how I felt. Like, I am not welcome. And I had to know people. I had to find people to meet, right? Just like you, Dennis, as a collector, and all the other collectors that do out there, they find those people that have ingrained themselves in the hobby in some avenue, right? In grading, in raw, in just sheer numbers of collecting, like me, 31 years, 34 in total with sports cards, but 30 going on 31 with Griffey. You have to find people like that, right? And you have to attach yourself onto the people that you connect with individually, right? So if you're out there doing your searching, Blowout, FCB, Facebook, Instagram, and you meet people and you're like, dude, I don't vibe with you, then remove yourself from that. Don't stick in that relationship because you feel like they can get you something, because ultimately it's gonna convert you or take you away from who you are as a person with your values and morals. Okay. It has nothing to do with grading or raw or anything else. It's that you alluded to it earlier, Dennis, is that we individually as human beings have values and morals, okay, about who we are and what we stand for. And again, when you're searching, attach yourself onto the people that are of like mind, that are of like morals and are of like values. And unfortunately, this is the third time I've mentioned this, but I've lost friends along the way. I've alienated people. I've removed myself from that by standing for what I believe in. Right? For not being one of the good old boys, for not being too cool for school. I'm going to use your phrase because I use it all the time, right? I think it's our generation, too cool for school, right? But they are too cool for school. They feel that they own the market. They feel like they can do whatever they want by saying, this is the price of the card. These are the price of the cards. This is what it is going to be. And they all kind of come together and say, this is how it's going to be. And unfortunately, Dennis, I will say this without naming names. It's not the point I'm trying to make here, but that happened in the Griffey market over the course of the last 3 years, from the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, all the way up until I'd say the beginning of this year. And so I've distanced myself and alienated myself from those individuals because I don't stand for it. And I want you and the countless other people, I'm not saying countless other people have reached out to me, but the countless other people searching for that same exact answer that you're searching for, I want them to find me. I want them to see these videos and say, that's a guy that I can trust. That's a guy that can help me along my hobby journey. Not sell me cards, not make me money, but help me along my hobby journey. Yeah, if you want to buy, sell, and trade, that's fine. And I want to be able to do that, but that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I think it's, and when, and folks out there, Marco, when he talks about this, he means it's not just Griffey cards. He's got a great understanding of the hobby. 34 years gets you that. You've been doing it for a long time, and you're not like a lot of us who took a break for like 20 years, right? What happens is you get older, you move on with life, you do different things, and the next thing you know, you're getting back into this when you're older. And that happens because, you have a family and, okay, what do I do now? I need something. I need a hobby. I need something to do because I can't do all the things I used to do because your priorities are shifted and they changed. I'm lucky because my focus is pretty, I have a really singular focus now with how I collect. So people like you and a couple others are all I really need to do and all I really need to talk to continue to build my collection and do what I do. But for those that are out there still learning, before I want to ask you another question, and then we're going to go into your origin story because I think I want to pack in this episode with your origin story because this episode is just jam-packed with awesome stuff. And I think it'd be great to just kind of mesh them both together because I'd like to release this episode. We're going to release this episode real soon because I think on the heels of everything that's going on, I think it's important to have it out there. And
awesome.
Yeah, so I think this is I'm kind of changing my mind on here. So this isn't going to be number 3. This is going to be number 1, and we'll have number 2 though follow. But you talk about people. Who do you follow? Who do you listen to? That's been a big, influencers. Are influencers bad for the hobby? I don't know if I call myself an influencer, even you. Who knows? I'm just interviewing people, but I could be perceived as an influencer. You got Jeff Wilson. You've got, Sports Card Dad. You got, our Dustin, our buddy Dustin. You've got, the crossover guys, the Josh and Chris and the stuff that they do. I don't know if I consider all those guys influencers. I just feel like they're people talking on social media. I mean, Jeff Wilson kind of feels like he kind of has an energy that, he's talking about cards. He thinks you should, buy. Here's the top 5. I don't think he's nefarious at all. I think Jeff's a really nice guy. I don't have anything against Jeff, but, he's Slab Stocks, Nate and Aaron, good guys. But we're all talking about cards, but are we influencing people? I think we're all trying not to, but we're still talking about them. So technically we are. What are your thoughts on influencers? Because all those people I just listed, I don't really feel like they are. And maybe even Jeff Wilson, who knows? He just likes to talk about the hobby too. Maybe I'm being ignorant, but I don't think any of those people are nefarious. I don't think any of those people are trying to do something they shouldn't do. I think they're all, good people that are just love talking about cards. Some of them are making money with it. Great. Well, there's nothing wrong with making money. I can't hold that against another person. What are your thoughts on influencers and a lot of people listening to them in the hobby today?
So I have to start with this. Anybody outside of a certain sector, right? I mean, sports cards, clothing, makeup, the outside world is going to view that individual as an influencer. And it's unfortunate that we have to put a title on it, right? That we have to put that the world, not you and me. That's a word that literally is not in my vocabulary. I can't stand it. I can't stand, I can't stand AI, like the whole fake thing. I'm not going to go into that, but there's so much nonsense out there right now on TikTok and all these social media websites that are draining the minds of our young generation coming up, right? So that's the words. And again, I'm dating myself feeling that way. That's a whole other topic. That's not card related, but it could be card related. When somebody puts a title on something, they want to call you an influencer. So Dennis, I will tell you this much, that if you're bringing people together to talk about the hobby, to give them ideas, to give them a different viewpoint of the hobby, the outside world is going to view you as an influencer. And again, you and I and those that are avid followers of you and appreciate, again, going back to what I was just talking about, right? The values and the morals that you have as a person and as a person in the hobby. Okay, they're going to follow you regardless of whether or not they feel you as an influencer or not. And again, more power to the people that are out there making money doing it, right? I mean, not everybody wants to work a 9-to-5 or a 15-hour shift in a job that they're working their butts off for when they can sit at home and talk about stuff they love all the time. What's the difference than somebody playing football for a living, right? What's the difference in somebody talking about cards, sports cards, or makeup or clothing, okay, and making money enough to live a life than being a professional baseball player, a volleyball player, a basketball player, a football player? It's the same exact thing. Right? Yeah. So I don't think of it as a negative connotation, right? I do want to not necessarily influence, but I do want to make sure people have all the facts, all of the knowledge that I have before they do something with the hobby. Grade, purchase, trade, sell, whatever they want to do in the hobby. I want them to have that. And that's what you and myself and all the people that you mentioned, that's what I'm hoping they're there for, right? Is to make our hobby better. So I hope that answers the question, but genuinely, that's how I feel. Yes, I do feel that we're influencers in today's world, but it's how we influence. Does a NFL player, do they have influence? Yeah. Does Katy Perry, first name that came to mind, I do love her. I love her music, but does she have influence? Absolutely she does. How does she use that influence? How do we use the influence? Good or bad? And that's the point there is, do we use it for good or bad, Dennis?
Well, it's like are you an influencer or are you an educator? Are you educating people? I like to think this show educates people because we're talking and learning about everybody's journey and hobby. Speaking of journeys and hobbies, let's talk about your journey. How did you get into cards? Like, how did this whole thing start? 34 years is a long time, Marco. Walk us through. You don't have to go through every little detail, but give us sort of like the elevator speech on the 34 years in the hobby for you and what it's meant, and how you're growing your collection and what you've been doing. I know you're a big Griffey guy, but how did this whole thing start?
Yeah, no, I can definitely do the elevator speech, but and I would encourage Dennis, you and I have chatted several times, so the ins and the outs, the littles and the bigs, and I would encourage anybody that has the pleasure, I would say, with Dennis watching some of his episodes to see this, that reach out to me and I'll give you it all, because there's stuff that I'll probably leave out that you might want to know. So, Dennis, it started back in the late 80s. I'm an 80s baby. I was born in 82, so that it puts me at 41 now. But I was born in the 80s. I was collecting Ninja Turtles, and I lived right down the street from and I grew up around this, right down the street from a sports card shop. And this didn't happen until later on, but I was able to frequent that. I mean, I played baseball all the time, so that's kind of the way in, right? You have to have a way in. Besides just having a sports card shop down. I played baseball all the time. At that point, I was only playing baseball. I wasn't a 3-sport guy like I was in high school. But I played baseball, and I love baseball. I was a center fielder. I was a junior, right? But my Griffey story doesn't start until 1993. But my sports cards collecting story starts in the late 80s. And alongside me collecting Ninja Turtles all through the early 90s. And again, I'm not buying them. My mom and dad are purchasing them when they go to a Walmart or a Shopko. I don't even think Shopko's in business, or a Montgomery Ward's, or all these places that are no longer in business, unfortunately. That's where I would get these Ninja Turtles. So I was naturally a collector. And one thing that, Dennis, you don't know, I haven't mentioned this, and I don't know why I keep forgetting, but my collecting mindset started with my dad. I mean, my dad's a major collector. I mean, you see all these books. This is about I would say 1/16 of the books that he has in his library. So he collects books, he collects dragons, he collects swords, he collects all these things. So I grew up in a collector's home, like how to treat things, how to open a package, how to do all those things. So I naturally had this in my mind, and so much so, I have to mention this, that my Ninja Turtle collection that I had from as a kid. I mean, these figures are like in pristine used condition. They have the card backs, they have their accessories. And so that was the same way that I treated my baseball cards. My first guy was Nolan Ryan. He was the man back then. I used to rock the Texas Ranger hat. I played on the Rangers in Babe Ruth Little League for a while. So that was my dude. That was my guy. So I had Nolan Ryan books. I had all those little cheapy late 80s, early 90s cards. And then fast forward here, in February of 1993, this was, years after I started going to the local sports card shop. In February of 1993, I was cognizant, aware of values of cards. Everybody kept talking about Beckett. So I'm like, hey, Mom, Dad, take me to the card shop. I mean, I could walk there, but I was like, hey, take me to the card shop, and I'm going to get my first Beckett. And guess who was on the cover of that first Beckett? Dennis, you know this, but to everybody else, the February 1993 Beckett, baseball Beckett, featured none other than Ken Griffey Jr. on the front cover and his 1993 Upper Deck baseball card. And I was hooked from there, right? I mentioned I'm a junior, so Marco Bisio Jr. I played center fielder. I'm not left-handed, but when I was at the plate, I tried to emulate Griffey as much as I could. And, I felt like I was all cool, and all the kids did it, so it wasn't just me. But, we all had our hats on backwards. So that started the love and just the devotion to this dude, right? He played with his dad. I ended up getting to play with my dad in volleyball in high school. Never obviously played when I was in college with him, but I got to play with my dad in high school, and my dad played pro volleyball before me. And I mean, it was a pretty amazing time to be a kid and to do these things. I mean, there was no phones. When I knew that when I was done playing, my mom would come out and flip the switch in our little playroom out in the garage. That's when I knew that it was time to come home. And during the summer, when those lights came on the streets, that's when it was time to come home. So there was no cell phones, there was no social media. I wasn't in front of my, I was very limited to the time that I got to spend on my regular Nintendo. I wasn't able to have a Super Nintendo. I had a 64. And so again, I digress and go back to the card collecting world. But so February of 1993, and as you can imagine, I was 11 years old then. I was only getting the upper decks, the fleers, the basic cards. And it wasn't until, the early 2000s, honestly, that I was able to pick up some of those cards that everybody wants on their list. I mean, I had a few, right? And I would classify them in a snap case, or a magnet, or not. There was no magnets back there, and a screw down, or a top loader, or if it was in a binder, right, by value of the card that was listed in Beckett, and that was it. So we talk. When I graduated high school was 2001. I ultimately stopped collecting. I halted. I should say in the year 2000. That's when I was a senior in high school. Was dating a high school cheerleader from another high school. I was a starting varsity quarterback. So the last thing on my mind, right, was collecting baseball cards. And so that's when it stopped. But in late 2002 is when I picked up, I was still in college. I had some money. I had a job. I was able to pick up some of those cards. And again, like, the cards prices today are nothing like they were back then. So I was able to pick up a PMG for $50. I was able to pick up some of these cards for a couple $100 as opposed to the tens of thousands of dollars they have. So again, in a nutshell, the abridged version of my collecting journey started in 1993. I collected all the way up until 2000, reconnected with the hobby in 2002, and from 2002 until now, essentially. It's been nonstop, picking up this card. There was a brief stint, again, financial stint in 2009. We all know what happened in 2009 to 2011. There was a massive recession in our world, and I fell victim to that too. I lost my house. I tried to save my house. I sold a couple cards. Some of those cards are some of the biggest cards in the hobby now. The EC now from '98, the '97 Team Mirror Gold, a '98 Masterpiece. What were some of the a '96 Mirror Gold that I cracked out of a case that was a PSA 10 purchased in January of 2007. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, there's a lot to my story, and there's a lot that goes along into this, to the knowledge that I have, to the people that I've met, to ultimately getting connected with Dennis and you all, that I would love to share. And so it's not been, there's been good, bad, and ugly in my collecting journey. I've met some great people. I've met some negative people. I've lost some friends that I've alluded to, hobby friends that I've alluded to, because I've stood my ground. And the way that I've collected has always been about love for the card. And, Dennis, and I believe it was the second episode, you asked me, what would you, to people that are coming in, what advice would you give to them, to new people in the hobby? And my exact words were, hashtag on Instagram, collect what you like or collect what you love. Don't be influenced, right? Don't be influenced by anybody else. PSA 10, PSA, BGS, inserts, parallels, this player, just go out there and do what you love. And that's what I've done since day one. So again, the majority, although I do have, I wouldn't say an infinite, but a large library, no pun intended, of knowledge about the hobby in general, that 95% of it is Griffey related. That translates over into the rest of the hobby and collecting. And, we talked about everything else with grading today. That's where it started, was just the love that I have for that man, for Griffey, for what he did for the hobby, for what he still does for the hobby. And that's my collecting journey. That's why I love what I do. That's why I'm not influenced by grading and all this other stuff. I'm going to collect what I love, and I'm going to give as much knowledge to guys like you, Dennis, as I can, and to the rest of you. So that's my journey. Obviously super passionate about it. That's how it really started.
Well, thanks, Marco. I appreciate you taking the time to jump on. We'll have a part 2 to this show. The series with Marco, because there are some, we talk about 90s inserts, the condition sensitivities, and lots of other things that he alluded to earlier too as well. So we'll pick up where we left off there. But this is a great way to kind of get an intro story for you. Talk about some current events that are happening in the hobby that I think are fairly relevant, and things that you can speak to, being a collector who, you stopped in 2000, came back into your 2-year window. I mean, not a lot of us took 2 years off. A lot of us took many, many years off. So you've been pretty much doing it nonstop. So you have a different and unique perspective on everything. So thank you, Marco, for being willing to jump on. And what is your Instagram tag if folks want to follow you, want to see what you have to say?
Absolutely. So I alluded to the Ninja Turtle collection, but another side of the collection is all things Tolkien, Middle Earth, Lord of the Rings. For those that don't know Tolkien or Middle Earth, but it's Tolkien TMNT Griffey 24. That is my handle on Instagram. So go follow me, check it out, and reach out whenever you have any questions.
Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Marco Bisio Jr. and follow him, find him. Again, click the subscribe button and follow Sports Card Dad content. We got Dustin's doing his daily shows. They're awesome. It's good stuff. A lot of great content. Please, we got some cool stuff coming up on the horizon as well. But give us a follow and a subscribe. You can find me at PC with DPZ on Instagram. Thank you, folks, for taking some time to spend some time with both of us today and learn a little bit more about cards and different perspectives and journey and all of that good stuff. Remember, it's a hobby. It's just fun. So enjoy yourself. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.